Good day, everyone. I'm Ginny Caro, and I'm pleased to present today how opioid use can impact your business. If you have questions during the presentation, please ask them in the Q&A window that should be in the lower right hand of your WebEx screen. I'll be answering any questions posed in that Q&A at the end of the presentation. You may also see a chat window. We ask that you please keep comments in that Q&A and refrain from using chat. Again, I'm Ginny Caro. I'm Senior Vice President and Chief Claims Officer with CopperPoint Insurance Companies. I have over 30 years experience in medical case management and insurance industry. I've worked for CopperPoint for over 19 years. I hold a master's degree in social work at the University of Missouri and a master's in human resource development and management from Webster University. And I look forward to talking to you today about the opioid crisis. CopperPoint Insurance Companies was founded in 1925, and it is a leading provider of workers' compensation and commercial insurance solutions. We currently operate in 6 states: Arizona, California, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, and Utah. CopperPoint Mutual Insurance Holding Company is the corporate parent of Arizona-based CopperPoint Insurance Companies and California-based Pacific Compensation Insurance Company. We are a rated A- excellent by AM Best company. Today our agenda is going to consist of 5 separate topics. The first topic is definition and types of opioids. The second is the cost. Third, doctor's responsibility when prescribing. Fourth, spotting potential misuse. And fifth, what employers can do. Today we will not be talking about medical marijuana in the workplace, as that is a completely separate topic. First, we'll start out with definitions. Opioids do play an important role in the recovery post-trauma, post-surgery, and other medical conditions. However, appropriate type of opioid, appropriate dosage, and duration need to be considered. So the definition of opioids are a diverse class of moderately strong painkillers, which include codeine, hydrocodone, morphine, oxycodone, hydromorphone, and fentanyl. And on the slide, you'll see brand names under those separate categories. If you listen to the news, almost daily there will be a story about opioids, and recently there has been focus on fentanyl. There's been an influx of fentanyl from other countries. This drug is extremely dangerous and is primarily used for end-of-life pain management. It should not play a role in the majority of workers' compensation claims. Drug misuse. We'll talk about the misuse of opioids, and to level set, please refer to the definition on this slide. It's improper or unhealthy use of medication as prescribed. It includes the repeated use of drugs to produce pleasure or alter or avoid reality. It includes using prescription drugs in ways other than prescribed or using someone else's prescription. It generally begins as a voluntary behavior, but with continued use, the ability to exert self-control can become impaired. Drug misuse can lead to drug addiction. Misuse and drug addiction are not always easy to identify, but understanding the difference and being aware of what to look for in your employees will help maintain a safer, more productive work environment. And the definition of drug addiction is substance use disorders, including drug addiction, at the severe end of the spectrum, are characterized by a person's inability to control the impulse to use drugs even when there are negative consequences. The opioid epidemic. The U.S. per capita has one of the highest rates of opioid use in the world. Drug overdoses exceed motor vehicle accidents as the leading cause of unintentional death. Drug overdose deaths involving prescription opioids rose from 3,442 in 1999 to 17,000 in 2017. That results in 47 people a day dying from prescription opioids. This is an epidemic and has significant impact on business. The impact it does increase risk of workplace injuries and incidents, and it does increase ER visits, hospitalizations, and other medical costs. So we're going to talk a little bit about the cost now. The U.S. opioid market in 2017, that was the latest data available, consisted of $13.3 billion United States dollars. It's estimated that the opioid epidemic cost the U.S. economy over $95 billion annually, with employers paying $18 billion of that. This includes, but is not limited to, diminished productivity, actual cost of medical care, and the actual cost of workers' compensation claims, etc. Total workers' compensation claims spent on opioids in 2017 were $3.7 billion. So 1 of every 7 medical dollars is spent on opioids. The misuse of prescription opioids results in additional costs, and these can be measured through increased absenteeism, diminished productivity, poor morale, additional injuries, increase in workers' compensation claims, and increase in healthcare claims. The claim costs are more than 3 times greater when opioids are prescribed than compared to similar injuries without opioid prescriptions. Again, opioids can and are appropriate for some injuries. However, close medical monitoring and working within the acceptable guidelines should be adhered to. Additional costs are when we utilize opioid prescriptions, there can often be a number of companion prescriptions to combat the effects of opioids. So appropriately using the opioids can reduce those companion prescriptions. And they are typically prescribed for constipation, gastrointestinal issues, sleep issues, anxiety, erectile dysfunction, and overdose reversal. I trust you've all seen the commercials regarding OIC. OIC, or opioid-induced constipation, is just one of the effects that the big pharma companies are combating. They're doing this by creating new drugs to counteract the opioid effects. Doctors' responsibility when prescribing. In response to the opioid epidemic, most, if not all, states have guidelines for prescribing opioids for the first time and/or with chronic pain. In addition to guidelines, some states have statutes regarding opioid prescribing. An example of state requirements is in the state of Arizona, ARS 23-1060-202. The prescribing physician must justify the use of the controlled substance, including documentation that 1, a physical exam was conducted, 2, a substance assessment was completed, and 3, the employee gave informed consent for the opioid treatment. In addition, after the prescription, the physician has a list of the requirements they need to do. Examples include treatment plan, face-to-face follow-ups, random drug screening, and the medication regimen is providing relief that is demonstrated by clinically meaningful improvement in function. SB 1001 requires physicians check the Prescription Monitoring Program, or PMP, database before prescribing a new opioid, yet less than 40% of Arizona medical practitioners do so. The California equivalent was enacted in 2016 and is SB 482. This took place effective 10/2/2018. All prescribers of opioids are required to consult the CURES, which stands for Controlled Substance Utilization Review and Evaluation System database, before prescribing such substances, and to periodically check the database throughout the duration of treatment. Additional doctor's responsibilities when prescribing. SB 1001 limits an initial prescription for an opioid to a 5-day supply, while permitting a 14-day supply for initial prescriptions following a surgical procedure. There are some exceptions, such as an oncology diagnosis, traumatic injury, hospice care, burn care, and a few others. SB 1001 further prohibits a health professional from issuing a new prescription order for an opioid that exceeds 900 morphine milligram equivalents, or often referred to MME. Prior to the focus on misuse of opioids and prescribers having guidelines, we have seen MMEs greater than 3,000. That is such a phenomenally high level that they shouldn't be able to function with that. The California Medical Board issues guidelines for prescribing controlled substances for pain, but they do not mandate a standard of care. California's Medical Treatment Utilization Schedule, called MTUS, consists of evidence-based, peer-reviewed, nationally recognized standards, and does contain opioid treatment guidelines. Both CopperPoint and Pacific Compensation Insurance Companies do have RNs on staff that can assist with understanding these different statutes and or provide reference guidelines. Some of you may have heard in the news recently here in Arizona, Misuse, which is a Chandler, Arizona-based drug manufacturer of Subsys, and Subsys is a sublingual fentanyl, the one drug we talked about earlier that is usually for end-of-life pain control. Their executives, including the company founder, John Kapoor, was found guilty of racketeering on May 2nd of this year for bribing physicians across the country to write Subsys prescriptions and misleading insurance carriers about a patient's need for Subsys. Misuse later filed for bankruptcy protection on June 10th of the same year, days after agreeing to pay $225 million to settle a federal investigation into the marketing practices of Subsys. It's almost daily you'll see something in the news with regards to different lawsuits around the marketing of different opioids. Numerous states are in fact suing the large pharmaceutical companies for false advertising, and you can find that very easily by searching the web. We're going to move to identifying opioid use in the workplace. And typically, opioid addicts usually appear in one of two stages. Addicts may seem relaxed and functioning well, but mood swings could be evident. Addicts may fall asleep at their desk, in their car, or even in the bathroom. As dose wears off, the addict may begin to display signs of withdrawal. That withdrawal may manifest through nausea, diarrhea, sweating, shaking, aches, and/or runny nose. In addition, there's two primary areas where you can look for behaviors to identify opioid use. One is physical and one is behavioral. Under physical, we look for drooping eyes, constricted pupils even in dim light, sudden itching or flushing, slurred speech, drowsiness, lack of energy. Behaviorally, they may be withdrawing from social activities. They may have increased absenteeism. They may have mood swings. They may have serious unexplained financial problems. Physical and behavioral signs of opioid use may be present, but not constitute impairment. That's one of the questions that remains to be answered. What actually constitutes impairment? There are effects on the business, and those often result in additional costs. But workers who misuse prescription opioids are absent on average 3 extra days per year. I've seen studies that show it can range anywhere from 3 days per year to up to 30 days per year. But in fact, the effect of opioid use on absenteeism is greater than heavy alcohol use. Employees with opioid addictions drive a higher turnover rate. Employees with opioid addictions change jobs more frequently. High overdose deaths in industries and occupations with high rates of work-related injuries. An additional effect on business, 7 out of 10 employers are feeling the effects of the opioid crisis in one way or the other. Between 1999 and 2015, Arizona businesses have lost $31.7 million in real output. This could result in healthcare costs, workers' compensation costs, and/or productivity. Construction and manufacturing industries have been hit the hardest by the opioid crisis, with opioid prescriptions consistently 5 to 10% higher than other industries. Combating the crisis. It's very important that you have a drug-free workplace policy and drug testing designed in conjunction with HR, legal counsel, and employee relations. It should consist of clear written policy, employee education, and it also should include and define what drug-free means in the workplace. Understand the law for prescription drug use at work. The ADA may protect an employee at work. In addition, drug testing, you could have in your workplace policy, pre-employment, for cause, and post-accident. Just make sure your organization has defined what reasonable cause for drug testing means. Combating the crisis. Drug-free workplace policy and drug testing designed in conjunction with HR, legal counsel, and employee relations we've talked about is an important component. One of the components should include employee assistance programs, or EAPs. It is in the employer's best interest to identify opioid misuse. Refer the employee to an EAP program or other community resource, and EPAs are most effective when employers consider that replacing an employee can cost between 25 and 200% of his or her annual compensation. And that does not include the loss of company knowledge, continuity, and productivity. The workers' compensation industry continues to look for ways to keep injured workers from falling into the dangerous cycle of unnecessary overprescribing of opioids and other non-recommended prescription drugs. Using ODG or other evidence-based treatment guidelines or drug formularies is one of the ways to do so. This translates to better outcomes, better quality of care, and ultimately lowering workers' compensation costs. We're going to open it up at this time for questions. Okay, it looks like we have quite a few questions coming in. The first one I see was referencing one with regards to MME or morphine milligram equivalent. Oh, it says that when I was speaking of MME, I referenced 900 MME is the high level of standard. Actually, that I misspoke. That is a 90. You'll see MMI equivalent ranges anywhere from 50 to 120 being in the acceptable range. So thank you for pointing that out. I appreciate it. We have additional questions. Here's one. Where can I find my state's guidelines to prescribing opioids? Simply go online and Google state and opioid prescribing guidelines. Typically, the states have guidelines not only for workers' compensation claims, but for healthcare in general. The CDC is out there posted and is readily available, and multiple states are readily available and can be referenced. And you'll even see some documents where they are comparing the CDC to the different state guidelines. Okay, here's a question. What can I do if I think one of my injured workers is being prescribed opioids in air? So if we're referencing an injured worker receiving opioids in air on a workers' compensation claim, I would reach out to the claims adjuster. Pacific Compensation and Copper Point Insurance Companies both have RNs available for consultation on claims, and they can reach out to the doctors. The RN or the medical management team can reach out to the physicians for clarification on appropriateness of the use of those opioids, and or we can ask for a peer review where literally it's a physician-to-physician consultation to determine whether that use of the opioids is in fact, if it is in fact appropriate. What can I do if one of my employees seems to have an addiction but isn't interested in seeking help? Now that's a difficult one. One of the first things is one needs to recognize they need help, but there are times where opioids are prescribed and it is simply inappropriate. As I said in my presentation, we've seen individuals with MMEs as high as 3,000 MMEs on a daily basis. So if the employee has an addiction but doesn't want to seek help, I would make sure you refer them to EAP or other community resources, and perhaps just encourage them to speak with their doctor. One of the here I see the final question. Is it possible to get a copy of these slides? And yes, we're going to have a blog at the end, and I would just like to share with you that we will be posting the blog on our website. So, yep, I don't see any additional questions. So we would like to thank you for attending our webinar series. The video will be available after the presentation on our website, and we'll also have the blog posting regarding what we have discussed today. Much of the material in the PowerPoint is in that blog, also with reference materials on where the facts and figures come from. We will be sending out a short survey after the presentation and would appreciate any feedback you have. Finally, our next webinar will be on July 23rd, and we'll cover heat and heat illness prevention. I want to thank you today, and everybody have a great day. Thanks much.